Computer. All right, here we go. Dan, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you being on. So let's just kind of just to back up for a second. So we connected because of a couple things. Number one, you're an author. I was looking to connect with authors on LinkedIn, and then you sent me a message, and the message was, if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of just read a little bit of
Oh
it.
yeah, absolutely.
You
Please.
said I would love to chat. I literally wrote the book during late nights when I couldn't sleep. It's common for you, you said, with three scratch sheets of notes I wrote down while I was still in the Air Force. Oh, he's still got the sheets.
Absolutely.
Uh, while I was still in the Air Force, I never planned on being an author, and now everyone's asking me what's next. So, uh, why don't we just start from that point? So let's just kind of go back. Why don't you just give me a little bit of your background? Let's go back to the Air Force days. You kind of came up and you were in the top 1% of enlisted service members in the Air Force. And so you had a lot of leadership responsibilities. And why don't we just talk through that? What were you seeing? What was the itch that started to become a thing where you like, you know what, there's something that I'm seeing here that I need to talk more about?
Yeah, absolutely. So always strange and humbling to hear anything about yourself. That's one thing is so hearing those things is always difficult for me. I know some people, I'm not the only one that struggles when you hear praise from other people. It's something I'm dealing with. I've tried to deal with my whole life as being like, hey, thank you. That's awesome. I am proud of myself, right? So 22 years in the Air Force. Didn't think I was going to join the Air Force. It's one of those life decisions where I knew I didn't have direction. I knew that I needed something, um, that I wasn't just going to go party in college and waste my money and waste my time, my parents' time, money, or whatever. And I said, I'm going to give this Air Force thing a crack, and joined the Air Force. They made me a computer operator at the time. I'd only seen one computer. Shows how old I am. My parents had an old Packard Bell sitting in the basement, and I saw that computer, so I was like way in over my head, getting into tech school and learning the computer job, right? So
Mm.
I would say my level of commitment when I first came in the Air Force was surface level. I was like, I'm going to come to work every day. I was raised with strong work ethic. Retired Army dad, and hardworking German mother that came over, and I see how they operate, and I was like, you know what? If nothing else, I'm just going to work hard at my job, right?
Hmm.
Um, so fast forward, I'm 99% sure I'm going to get out of the Air Force, and I become a supervisor. I make E5, and it's the first time I become a supervisor. And I would say at that moment, something clicked in me to say, this is more than just a job. You know what I mean? I now have an opportunity to have an impact on someone's life. And I'm going to be a part of their story going forward. And I've seen, poor leadership and the impacts it can have on people. And I would say that's when it clicked for me and said, all right, this is going to be a career, and what I care about is leading people. So, a lot of jobs throughout the, don't want to go through the whole bio, just a lot of jobs in the Air Force, culminating in retiring here in Colorado Springs in a leadership position. So
Hmm. Well, I'm going to embarrass you here, because so this was somebody that reviewed your book, and we're going to talk about it. And just for everyone, again, I'm going to put all this into the show notes. I'll make sure I'll have links to everything. But the book is called "Hitting the Gas: Finding Success in Leadership, Life, and Balance." And like I said, I'll put all description in there and everything so everybody can get access to it. But one of the folks that had read the book and reviewed said he's one of the greatest leaders I've ever had the honor to serve with. What makes him extraordinary isn't just his skill or drive, is his heart. It's a tremendous love for people paired with unstoppable optimism for those who truly care. I mean, like whoa, incredible stuff, man. I mean. So you're such a humble guy. Like we've only had a few conversations and you're such a humble guy. And as I was like, so I'm in the process I write, do a lot of writing. I'm working on a book right now. It's the second kind of an expansion to a smaller book that I wrote, and I know how hard it is to do it. And I think that, it's just amazing to me that what you've produced, the impact that it's already having on people. And I just think that there's something to be said about that. It's, I think that if you have a passion and if you have true intent and you have something that you want to say, that everything sort of just works itself out. So, I just so congratulations again on that. So let's talk a little bit about what was the moment that you said I should write a book.
Yeah, that's I've really been thinking about that because I figured that's probably the most common question is like, hey, when did I've had in the back of my mind, I want to write a book. When did you decide to write a book? I think it's kind of been iterative, right? Like I think there's multiple times that I thought about it. So I'll kind of try to step through that. Funny story, the first time that I ever even had the inclination, like I was selected for a higher level leadership, the type of leadership position where you're like, okay, now I have to go to Washington D.C. and I have to literally go to school to learn how to eat dinner at the what I mean, like you go to etiquette school, right? And you find yourself in these positions where you're like, wow, I didn't think I'd be here. Well, we were meeting with the highest level leader in the Air Force on the enlisted side, the chief master sergeant of the Air Force, right? So we're sitting in a room in this cohort discussing things, and I'm talking to peers, right? And we're just kind of BSing and having talking about life and stories or whatever, very low key blue collar conversation, right? And then the chief master sergeant in the Air Force walks in, and everybody else starts kind of acting different. Um, that's not who I am, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they start trying to quote leadership books to him. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, according to you know John Maxwell or this or that, and they're trying to quote to him. And I got a little frustrated, to be honest. And one of them finally looked at me and tried to put me on the spot almost. One of the peers that I'd just been kind of talking with, and he was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, Chief Tester, what would you say your favorite leadership concept is from another book?" And I look back now and it sounded super cocky, but I was frustrated and I said, you know what? I don't read leadership books. I write leadership books.
Oh.
And I hadn't written a word. It was just my way of saying I want to lead the way I lead. You know what I mean? Can I take core concepts from other people? Yes. But people don't want checklist leadership. They don't want somebody going, well, according to this other person, yes, glean from other people. But if you're not the leader you are, so that was the first time that I ever even thought about it. Fast forward, 3 years, I'm sitting in my office late at night. I had decided to hit the button. That's what we call it in the military, right? Hit the button. I'm retiring. And I'm sitting there and I'm really reflecting on I've always felt the Air Force gave me way more than I ever gave the Air Force. So
Mm.
I'm reflecting and I'm sitting there going, man, what am I leaving anything behind? You like to think you left an impact, the ripples in the pond, that you left some leaders out there. And I was like, how could I help grow that future leader that I haven't? And I was like, that's when I sat down. It was late in the office, and that's when these script. I wrote down a rough outline. I said, I'm gonna write a book. Um, didn't know if I'd really do it, but it was my way of making myself feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how that goes. And
Yeah.
I retire. I throw all my stuff in the closet. That's what you do when you retire. You have your awards and all that stuff. It just goes in the closet. So I'm cleaning out my closet like 5 years later, and I find the papers, and it was a gut punch. Like I tend to be hard on myself, and I looked at the notes, and I was, I almost disgusted with myself. I'm like, you said you were going to do something, you didn't do it, right?
Mm.
That's the moment I think that I committed to actually writing the book. I would say.
Wow. That's amazing. And so from the time that you had that first revelation and to the time that you actually started to really take the actions, like the first few steps to writing the book, how long of a gap was that? How many years was that?
So when I went to that leadership seminar, that was, I would say, that was about 2 years before I retired. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then I retired. And then when I grabbed my notes out of the closet, so probably 7 years span of, between making the comment that I never even thought was going to be true,
Yeah.
to scratch sheets of notes late night in the office, feeling sorry for myself, to finding the notes and giving myself the old gut punch to be like, how dare you say you're going to do something and not follow through?
Now, would you say that the decision to start was that more because you had this, you just had this, you had something to say and you just felt like I can't not say this in the way that I want to say it, or was it more just I just need to follow through on this thing that I said I was going to do, or maybe a little bit of both?
So at first, surface level starts as just, hey, you said you were going to do something, you should follow through.
Hmm.
And, um, here's where I'll try not to get emotional, but, you know, a lot of people have leaned on me and said, hey, I love the way you lead. How do you do it? To me, I've never done anything that's outrageous. I mean, I literally just tried to care, you know what I mean? And, then it turned into, I'm not going to be on this earth forever, and I have three sons, and I'd like them to know how my mind and my heart work, and putting it down on paper and leaving that legacy behind to be like, hey, this is how your grandpa led people, or this is what he thought about life. Um, that that made the purpose that made me move.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. And now here we are. Look at you. Um, so
I need a drink of water after that one. Sorry.
yeah. Um, so okay, so now we're at the point where you're committed and and by the way, I just want to comment on that. I think that is incredible. I mean, there's so many people that have a lot to say or have experiences that they want to share with the world, but they just, they don't put that one foot in front of the other and they don't make that commitment. So um, yeah, hopefully that's someone's listening to that out there. They're ready to make the commitment. This is your signal to get started on that. I always thought about that, like wondering what my grandparents or other people that I admired that have never put anything down on paper. What do they think about the political climate? Where do they stand on certain issues? And so that is one of the reasons why I love writing so much and why I'm trying to help other people write as well, is because just think, like you said, putting things down on paper and having that impact for future generations is huge. Even if it's only a select group of people that actually read it, it's still worth the journey, right?
You just hit the nail on the head. And I'm sure we'll get into more of like when it finally came time to hit publish or whatever. Um, but like you said, I had to come to the realization I don't care if just my sons read
Yeah, exactly. And again, just before one last thing on this, and that was your ideal reader, right? When you were writing these words down, I'm sure that your boys were front and center, and these are the things that you wanted them to know about you and what you think about the world and leadership specifically. So anyway, I love that. All right, so now let's dig into the nuts and bolts. So you commit yourself to writing the book. What were some of the first steps that you took to get started?
it. Wow, it's hilarious and kind of crazy at the same time. Like I said in my first note to you, I have issues sleeping sometimes. I don't know why. It's something that I struggle with. And then part of me said, okay, am I waking? I literally was. It got to the point where I was waking up every day at like 3:13 or something. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's to the point I'm googling it. Like, why am I waking up at the exact same time? There's a lot of weird stuff on the internet. If you you
Oh,
know,
that's a rabbit hole. I'm
that's
trying to
right.
not go
Don't
down.
just like health, right? Don't Google what's wrong with you, because you're going to be dying.
Yeah.
But you know, it, I started going from I'm just going to go sit on the couch and watch TV to a gut check moment to go, maybe maybe I'm supposed to be doing something. You know what I mean? Maybe my spirit is uncomfortable right now. You know what I mean? Saying you've got to be doing something. So that's when once again I look at the scratch sheets and notes, and I'm like, I work a full time job. I'm a full time dad. You know what I mean? Like my son plays competitive soccer, and I try to be there for everybody. I'm like, when would I ever write this book? And I'm like, maybe this is why. Maybe I'm waking up because I know this is the only time that I will be able to do it. Um, I'll tell you the way I did it. I wouldn't recommend to anybody because sleep is good for those that can do it. You know, I just started jotting things down on Word documents. I'd just sit there and hammer away at the keyboard. A lot of times, I mean, there were times I fell asleep on the keyboard, like,
Wow.
yeah, just jotting down ideas. The reason I wouldn't recommend it for people, I had no organization, I had no publisher, I had no, way of approaching the structure besides a generic outline. So I had hundreds of Word documents that I was then trying to piecemeal together, which is was the hardest part, organizing it and saying, oh, you wrote this 3 times on 3 different Word documents because it was 3 in the morning and you were exhausted.
So, and how long, I mean, how long was that process that from just, just brain dumping on the Word docs until you had, at least you felt like you had enough material, okay, where now I can start massaging this into something like a book.
I would say a little over a year, 14 months
Okay.
of, yeah. And part of that was, because I struggle with being really hard on myself sometimes, I would spend a week pulling a thread on a subject, and then I would read it and I'd say, nobody cares. Nobody wants to read this, dude. Who do you think you are to write a book? And I would talk about self sabotage. I didn't just set it aside. I would delete it. I would
Wow.
delete it and go, I'm not writing this book. And maybe a few days pass or whatever. Wake up at 3 in the morning and start over. Don't
Wow.
recommend that. Don't
And
recommend that.
and prior to, I mean, just obvious the things that most of us have exposure to in terms of writing in school and whatnot. Did you have any experience with any sort of like really hyper long form type stuff like this? Certainly, I'm assuming that you didn't have a lot of book writing experience, but had you written before? Like, what was your writing experience prior to this process?
I would say, like anybody else, essays for college, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Talking papers for the military. We like talking papers or white papers. Oh my gosh, we got to do them about everything, right? We
Hmm.
do a talking paper for everything. So, I've written for high level leadership folks to review, you know what I mean? But totally different from sitting down and trying to put together a book. So that's what I would tell people. If you don't think you can do it, I promise you can, because if it can go from these 3 scratch sheets of paper, and my first iteration when I finally started putting everything together, I think it was like, I don't even know, 10,000 words, not even 10,000 words. So I
Hmm.
started looking up average lengths of leadership books or whatever. And I was like, well, that was fun. But they were like, oh, this could be a pamphlet that you hand out. And I'm like, well, I'm done. you know?
Yeah.
So another gut check moment where I'm like, well, I guess I'm not writing a book because, that's going to take forever.
How many words actually did you wind up getting into the book?
I honestly don't know. I think it's close to 40,000.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
want to say it's close to 40,000 because I was
Okay.
like, I need to, and I'm like, what I don't want to do is that I just dribble on just to make it to the length of a normal book.
Hmm.
So I was really cautious and really tried to make sure I wasn't being redundant and things, but without having a true editor and publisher, you know what I mean? I was really nervous.
Yeah.
So
And so you start brain dumping. I mean, let's just call it that, right? I mean,
yeah,
you were just basically, which I think is super important. I think that a lot of beginner writers, they feel like they need to have all this structure and all this organization. And I think that one of the lessons that I'm curious to see how what your experience was, but with my writing, I find that like the clarity comes from the writing. It comes from the grind of like not necessarily knowing what it is that you want to say at that one moment, but you're just you're just putting you're just putting things in motion, and then all of a sudden things will just, oh yeah, okay, there you go. Is that kind of how you saw it, or did you just have all this material and it was just pouring out, or where?
I wish I wish I had it all. When I wrote the outline, I was like, oh, I'll just expand on all these topics, right? But like you said, writing to me almost became therapeutic.
Mm,
Like I think you just articulate like very well is that I would be writing on a subject, and next thing you know, I've got 10 pages or something of where I was just like you see those memes of the angry typer or whatever,
oh
but it wasn't
yeah, yeah,
angry. It was just like passion and purpose coming out on paper and going, oh, and that reminds me, this one kid that like he was really lost, you know what I mean? And I had
Mm,
one conversation with him, or oh, you remember her? She wasn't, you know, sure that she was able to lead people, and then we talked about it, and she grew into herself, and like now she has all these subordinates that have reached high levels of leadership, and it was awesome, to be honest. It was exhausting and sad sometimes or whatever, but it was an awesome feeling. So for those folks that are sitting out there that are like, I've got stories inside me,
hmm
let them just come out naturally. You know, I mean, don't think you have to have the whole 25-page story typed up perfectly. Just let yourself unload on the notebook, on the keyboard, on just unload, and then go back and filter, right?
Yeah.
But don't filter those thoughts before they hit the paper.
Right. Like no one's gonna like this thing, or I'm saying this incorrectly, or whatever. I think that there is something also to be said about the fact that, there's the thinking, there's the writing, and then there's the editing and the polishing. Like those are three completely distinct activities. And I think that people get all wrapped up in, and I do think this is where a lot of people struggle. It's like, I can't be a writer. I just can't get my thoughts organized. It's like, if you were at a restaurant and your buddy asked you about what you thought about XYZ, you would probably just like, especially if you had if you had a couple beers, you
Yeah,
probably would be able to just let it flow. And I think that that's what you're saying here is that, you have to just allow yourself to just have that, just let it flow.
yeah.
Um, what would you say, aside from like basically the entire thing, which is a challenge in itself, but like, were there any specific obstacles that you ran up against while, like, maybe, well, I'll let you answer that one first, because I'm just curious, like, if were there any specific obstacles in the writing process specifically that you just were like, oh man, I bit off more than I can chew, or
Yeah.
I shouldn't
Oh
be
yeah.
doing this after all, like what?
Every day. Yeah. No, but you're right. So I'll try to put it to where, I think people can gain value from it, because aside from the negative self-talk or the, imposter syndrome saying you're not an author, even hearing you say, "Oh, you're an author," it still doesn't sound right
So
to
weird.
me. My kids joke with me, "Oh, Dad's a big author in the house." I love it because they razz me all the time, which is that means that I hopefully raise them correctly, because everyone needs sarcasm, right? But
hmm
aside from that, I would say the next hurdle was really taking all, because I said you need to let yourself just go unload, right?
hmm
Taking that and putting it together for those that decide to do this, it's going to seem daunting. Like, and don't let it stop you. That was the next big hurdle, is just putting it together. The next thing I would say is the Amazon KDP,
hmm
publishing process. It's awesome that they give that, opportunity to people, because I didn't even know that existed. But getting it in the correct format and stuff, I have a wonderful friend, who is a commander of mine, and he's referenced several times in the book because he is a phenomenal leader, phenomenal friend. Um, but he loves to geek out on this stuff. You know what I mean? So he did a lot of the editing and formatting for me. He
Oh.
told me, he was like, I'm not going to touch the words. He was like, I think the words are perfect as they are. He was like, I'm
hmm
going to change one word. He was like, but I'm going to help you get it in the right format if that's okay.
Which
Um,
you might call that like typesetting, right? So like
yes,
actually
yes,
taking the raw material, and just like formatting it so that the paragraphs and everything flow from one page to the next. And by the way, just to step back for a second, KDP, for anybody that doesn't know what that is that the Kindle Direct Publishing,
publishing,
right?
correct.
Yeah. And can you just talk for just a little bit about that, Dan, and
Yeah,
your decision to go that route? What was that like for you?
absolutely. So Google helped, right? Because I'm like, all right, hey, I think I'm writing a book. How do I publish a book? Shows you how prepared I was, super prepared. So for all those people that think they're underprepared, you couldn't probably be any more underprepared than I was. But so Google helps, right? So they say, all right, you can use Amazon. They have this free publishing service, which It can absolutely be 100% free, by the way. That's what people need to understand. Um, I looked at, what the royalty rates were for traditional publishers versus Amazon, what the normal turnaround time is,
Mm-hmm.
and things that, and I lean more towards Amazon because it's quicker.
Mm-hmm.
It could be potentially free, and I'll explain that too. So I went that route, and then I found out if you publish through Amazon, they will issue you a free ISBN. And I don't remember what that stands for, but it's the book that's on, or the number that's on the back of every book that registers you at the Library of Congress and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you use Amazon's ISBN, the free one that they give you, you can only sell and distribute on Amazon, which
Okay.
is fine, right? Like for those people that don't have extra money sitting around, I don't have extra money sitting around either. But if you're just like, I want to publish a book and it can't cost me anything, right? I just want to get my ideas out to people, but I'm not willing to spend a bunch of money to do it. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't afford a publisher and I don't want to do this. You can go publish a book on Amazon for free. It's literally,
And 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 when you think about publishing, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I do want to kind of come back to obstacles in a second,
yeah,
but like the 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 publishing process again, it's obviously the writing, but it's also like the book cover, the printing, the distribution. Like if you didn't do that, you would have to figure out a way to go off and do that on your own. I mean, there's some nice advantages to that. You have a little bit more freedom technically,
yeah,
I guess you might say, but there's an investment and the logistics of it. Like most people don't have any idea what they're doing to even go about doing that. So KDP
correct.
is a great option, obviously, sounds like.
Yeah, they have a book edit. I mean, they have a cover editor and everything, a program. There's online programs. There's Fiverr, or all those places that are, hey,
Hmm.
give me your ideas, and I will create a cover for you. So do not let it stop you. That's the big thing. And then for the ISBN, just to go, back to that for just a second, you can purchase your own ISBNs. They're a little pricier than I'd like, and they offer like you can buy one or 10. You know what I mean? So you're like,
Uh,
if I ever
uh,
think that I'm going to buy, publish another book, it's not cost prohibitive. I would say I don't remember the exact cost, but it gives you the flexibility that if I want to now try to get into bookstores, or if I want to do other, go another route, I own the copyright, I own the ISBN. So I would just say go in eyes wide open. If you're okay just getting your message out as fast as possible, lowest cost, then I would say look at Amazon, and it's an opportunity to get your book out at a low, at no cost really.
yeah.
You really think that you've got a movement or something that's going to resonate with people, and you want to get in the book distribution, and you want to do book sales and some of the higher end bookstores or stuff, then think about purchasing your own ISBN too.
Yeah. And obviously, like, Amazon takes a percentage of the fees, anything that's purchased. But it's still a lot better than, in terms of like rev share, it's still a lot, you still own a much more of a chunk than if you were to go through traditional publishing, which they're going to take a much higher stake. I mean,
Yes,
there's obviously advantages to that, right? Of course.
because
But
they handle the marketing and things
they
like
handled
that. So
all the marketing. So okay, so let's just step back for 1 second. I kind of bounced a little too far ahead because I'm still curious. Like, so, were there any during the writing process? We were talking about those moments where you just hit a wall, or you just felt like there's. Were there any? What were like some obstacles? Were there any like unexpected obstacles that you faced when you were writing that? I mean, I guess they would all be unexpected, but um, anything that may not be what you'd normally expect when, yeah, everybody, I think when you're writing a book, I'm sure that you get to a place where like you're going to be stuck, like you just don't know what to say, right? But were there any, well, what did you do in those situations? But then were there any other types of situations like that where you were just like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to break through
yeah,
this obstacle.
I would say the biggest moment for that was the one I was talking about earlier, where I finally started putting it together, and I was like, oh man, I got some ideas, and then I did a word count, and I was like, you have a handout.
Yeah, you got a
So
pamphlet.
yeah, you got a pamphlet, and that was one of those moments that was really really tough to deal with. To go,
Mhm.
you don't have enough ideas in your brain, and then I started going, well, I would reread it. So that's what I would tell people. I would reread it and then say, what real world situations did I deal with in my life, or that I've held heard from other folks or whatever, that I think that people could take a real life situation and apply it to a young leader or a parent or a coach or whoever, and that allowed me to kind of get through those obstacles, and then also giving myself forgiveness or grace to understand that I may not pump out all 40,000 words right now. I may be
Mhm.
laying in bed and I kept a notebook on my nightstand, which is pretty common for people, right? Where if I woke up and I was like, oh, you know what? I, I could add this to that chapter. And
Mhm.
just giving yourself the grace to understand that most writers don't just sit down and pump out a 40,000 page, or 40,000 word book without
Yeah.
going back and rethinking things or rewriting them. And another thing that came about with that is that at the beginning of every chapter, now I have an imagine this type thing to
Mm.
set the stage. And that
Yeah.
actually came from my friend, the one that helped me. He was like, "What if you led into the chapter with just an example of how this would be applied, so their mind is set right?"
Yeah, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and I can't say enough about him. By the way, it's Douglas Shahan. He's a close friend, was my commander. You know what I mean? But that friendship has grown to something. But he was like, I think if you set the stage, and then it also then led to the end where I said, I'm going to remind people that I don't have this all figured out. That the things that I'm telling them in this chapter, I still get wrong. So it
Mm.
led to a section at the end of every chapter called Real Talk, where I try to get vulnerable with the reader, and that was a way to get through the hurdles by using real life application of things I lived to apply it to the writing and get me through that hurdle.
Yeah, one of the things that in my own work, like where I'll have maybe I've worked out a solution to something or I've figured out a way forward, but then I'm always the self-doubt creeps in and it's like, yeah, but maybe you just got lucky or maybe that isn't going to necessarily apply to everybody or there's a lot of dependencies on that particular thing that you experience. So it's like to write it down in a book and put it out there and prescribe it to someone may feel a little bit ambitious or again, it's all just that self-doubt, right?
A
But
lot of that. It's a lot of
your
that.
but your advice is, just write it out, put it out there anyway. If it worked for you, it's going to work for a lot of other people. And if it's your philosophy and it's had a massive impact on people already, um, it'll work. It'll work and it's worth putting it down. When was this published? What,
August, I think it was August 12th of this year is when it
okay.
officially launched on Amazon. So
Yeah.
not that long ago.
No, it's just been recently. And I actually, just in full disclosure, I would normally have read the book before we would have a conversation. I'm waiting for this. I've ordered it. Um, and because this whole thing kind of came together pretty quick, I was like, you know what? This is going to be perfect. Having Dan on the podcast would be great. And then you booked your call, but I was like, you know what? Let's just do it and we'll
Yeah,
work through it. But I can't wait to get my hands on it. And there's like so much. There was somebody had put um, again, the reviews are incredible. Um, the gas philosophy, we'll just say the give a shit philosophy, and the mindset, and just like again, all of this. There's so many great reviews and people that have been loving what you put together, man. And that just again, it just blows my mind. Like how you can go from a couple of scratch pad, a couple of pieces of paper to then like wrestling with this at 3 o'clock in the morning and then you produce something that's impactful. I love that. Um,
appreciate it. That's
yeah,
still hard. It doesn't seem real to me either. So yeah, I try not to read the reviews because I get super emotional about them too, because I'm just like, that's all it ever mattered to me is like if I left some kind of lasting impact on somebody that they're like, hey, I use this philosophy. You know what I mean? That means a lot.
yeah. Just put earmuffs on. I'm just going to read a couple takeaways. Leadership's about presence, not position. About showing. It's about showing up for your people when it's inconvenient. I love that. Balance isn't a luxury; it's a necessity. that success includes protecting what matters most. I think that that's a lot. Most leaders don't necessarily, you don't hear them talking a lot about that, about balance and whatnot. I think that's really, really important. And that vulnerability is a strength. I think you prove that, obviously in the book, but even just in our conversation, embracing the failures, embracing the mistakes. And I think that that's why people are responding so well to it, honestly. I mean, and that's what's like, I think that that is just in general what's so refreshing about it, but it's also what's wrong with much of the content that's getting and what much of what's getting published today is just very like, I don't know, it's very surface level. And I think readers are evolving today. Readers want to hear about those failures and those mistakes. That's what we all identify with. And so, like just thinking of this in terms of a writing lesson, I think that, if you can get in touch with that vulnerability side, I think that that's going to make the writing and the impact so much more valuable for people. So,
Yeah, I think people have to realize that more people are dealing with the struggles that we all deal with than
hmm
we realize, right? And they
hmm
don't want a prescriptive, like you said, surface level answers. Like we don't want answers to the test, right? We want to be able to look at something and say someone else is having similar thoughts, struggles, things, and here's how they approach it. They don't even say they have all the answers. I'll tell people all the time. A lot of things that I talk about in the book, I struggle with every single day.
mm,
Self doubt, imposter syndrome. Wondering if I'm good enough, wondering if I'm doing, a good enough father, husband, leader. Um, the more we realize that the person next to you is dealing with a lot of the same things and
mm.
saying, you know what, I'm not going to give you an answer. Here's something that I thought about. Um, in my
Yeah.
book, I even use, I go back now and I'm like, maybe I overdid it, but I use things from movies, you know what I mean, that resonate with me, or that I teach my children concepts about life from book, from movies or things like that, where I'm like, hey, a lot of people have probably watched this movie, and in this moment in the movie, you see somebody that's going through the same thing you're going through, and
Yeah.
look, you can learn from that.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So just a couple other little questions that I'm just curious that I didn't get to in the process, and then I want to hear about what's next, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But during the writing process, so you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is it like, are you just working on, are you using notepad, paper? Are you like on a computer, just cranking out, just like, whatever's on your mind? And like, what's the writing process like, when you're having those early morning sessions, like what is it that you're actually doing?
yeah, so writing process was dependent on whatever was going on at the moment, right? So
hmm
a lot of times it was on the keyboard, because office setting, it made me think, okay, I can put pen, not pen to paper, proverbial pen to paper.
hmm
But sometimes it was laying in bed with that notebook on the nightstand, flipping on the light, hopefully not waking up my wife, and
mm
just writing some thoughts down, or memory joggers to myself about a story or a person that had an impact on my life, or that would relate to one of the chapters.
mm.
So it was just whatever. I mean, there was Friday nights where I couldn't go to sleep, and my wife knew, and she'd be like, well, I'm going to bed, you come to bed whenever. And yeah, I'd pour myself a bourbon and sit down and go, all right, I'm just gonna jot down some ideas, right? Just go to town on it. And some days I would look at it and be very happy and be able to go to sleep. And then sometimes, like I said, I would literally delete it. And that
Oh
makes me
man.
think, when you talk about the writing process, here's another thing that people might not want to do. So I didn't tell a soul
I
about
was
this book.
just thinking about that. I was
I
like,
didn't tell a
I wonder if
soul.
you're like telling, because when you mentioned your wife, I'm like, I wonder if he was like letting
Well,
people know that he was doing this. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, big mistake. Big mistake. So I had a full rough draft of the book in a Word document before I told a soul. And the only person I told was my commander, Colonel Shahan. And I said, hey, I did something. I put, some ideas down on paper, and he was like, man, I would love to lead it or read it. I would love to read it. And when I sent it to him, he was like, man, you've got something here. Let's really. And then we were driving in the car. We had just dropped my son off uh, at summer camp. And to me, I'm a surprise person, right? Like I like to surprise people. It's just who I am. And my wife knows this about, she's not a big fan of surprises. So
Mm.
you would think we've been together almost 30 years. You would think I would know that. But we're driving in the car and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know. So I wrote a book and she was like, what do you mean you wrote a book? You
Oh,
know,
wait, she didn't know that you were writing this.
nobody knew that I was writing the book.
Oh
Nobody.
man.
So, when you're
Whoa.
writing at 3 in the morning or whatever, and part of that was guarding, right? Like I was guarding. So the more people you tell you're going to do something, the more, guess what? Now you have 100 accountability partners, and I wasn't ready for that. You know what I mean? I wasn't ready for people saying, "When's the book coming out?" Are you did? Because what if I didn't do it? What if I didn't finish it? You know what I mean? And that's kind of a cop out on my part too. Like, and I learned that. But my wife was not happy with me. She was like, "This is something big," and she was very, very proud of me. But she
Mm.
was very upset that I didn't think enough to be like, I want you to be included on this. So, I've since talked to her about it, and really, what my vision was, because I like to surprise, I was like, babe, what I was thinking is that I was going to write this book, and I'm literally, it's going to be waiting on your pillow. You know what I mean? And I was going to be like, look what I did. Not the best approach. You know what I mean? I should have invited her in and said, this is what I'm doing. If I'm up at 3 in the morning, she knows I struggle with sleeping. Um, but yeah, that was not very well received. But I think it was me protecting, uh, you know,
I don't
myself.
know, man. I mean, so I with business too, I think about this a lot. It's like, a lot of people like to talk about the things that they're doing,
Yeah,
and it feels good because it feels like you're doing something. It's like, oh yeah, I'm working on this thing and I got this thing going on. And everybody's like, wow, that sounds great, man. Awesome. And then you just don't do anything.
yeah,
As opposed to like I'm just gonna keep it quiet until I produce something and then I'll share it with everybody. So I don't know. I think like that approach probably helped you. I love I mean, that makes complete sense where I love the way you frame it up. It's like I don't have all these accountability partners. It's true. But in retrospect, you think you probably would have just, I mean, certainly told your wife, but maybe a few other people just to have that accountability, or do you think you would have? I mean, because I don't know, man. I feel like keeping it tucked away is kind of I mean, I'm sure that that's an approach a lot of people take.
yeah. I would say, a lot of successful people, and I don't put myself necessarily in that boat yet, but a lot of successful people tell you you want to move in silence, right? You don't want
Exactly.
to tell the whole
Yeah.
world what you're trying to accomplish. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know if I would change it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I like,
Yeah.
I did the smart thing and apologized to my wife and said, look, I can understand why you feel that way. Like that you're my closest partner in life, right? Like, and you're my biggest advocate. She is my biggest supporter. She's like, she has probably always thought I should write a book. She always brags about me to people and says he's the best leader, that I've ever met.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know that I would change it though, because maybe that's, if you go back and you start regretting things,
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I would have finished the book then.
Hmm.
Maybe that outside pressure would have been enough for me to be like, this is not happening. And then I would have had to deal with all these people saying, "Ah, are you not, did you finish the book? Did you finish the book? And that
Right.
would have been a lot, you know?
Right. That makes
So,
complete sense. So what? All right. So as we're wrapping up the writing process, and then we'll just get to, I just want to hear like what's next, and I
yeah.
would like to dig into a little bit of, you know, post publish. How did you market? We don't have to go crazy with that, but I do want to touch on those things. But what would you say? What would you say your three? This is one that I didn't prep you for, but like your
It's all right.
three best writing tips? Like, what are the three things that you can think of that going into the next one? Because hopefully you write another one that you would do.
So first is just be okay with that. You're going to have self doubt. That's my
Hmm.
first writing tip, is that if you think Charles Dickens or whoever didn't sit down and say, this is a piece of crap when they were writing it, you're wrong. I guarantee it. I
100%.
guarantee it.
Yeah.
I don't know, never met Charles Dickens, you know what I mean? But I would bet there was nights where he had a glass of whiskey or whatever his favorite thing was and wrote some things down that he was like, I'm the worst writer in the world.
By the
So
way, like things that I thought were awesome 6 months ago, I cringe at right now, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And that you have to, number one, be okay with that voice.
Mm,
That voice is what makes successful people. It pushes you. It makes you edit yourself. It makes you look at things a different way, right?
mm,
So if you think that you're not going to have that voice over there, you're wrong. So number one, accept that that voice is there, but don't let it stop you.
mm. Yeah.
Two, don't try to finish the book before you start it. I would, don't think that you have to have the 40,000 words ready to go, that you're going to sit down at a typewriter or, whatever, and you're going to pump out 40,000 words. Be
Mm,
okay with just throwing ideas down and then figuring it out later. So that would be my second thing, is don't think it has to be finished before you even start it. And the third thing I would say is bring your vulnerability into your writing.
mm,
You know, don't think that you have to provide all the answers, especially it depends what type of book you're writing, right? Like this one's more leadership life. I have a little bit of parenting and stuff in there. God knows I don't have that all figured out. But be okay with being vulnerable and understanding that the target audience that you're reaching out to is the only one that matters. So
mm.
if you only reach the people that are struggling with the same things, how awesome is that?
Oh man, I love that tip so much, man. Yeah, we touched on that in the beginning. I love that so much. Everything will work itself out if you're doing that. Man, that's powerful. So you published the book. What's been, so that process sounds like it was pretty straightforward. I mean, well, you had to go through this editing and just real quick, you had some other people like in your inner circle that were helping you with some of the editing and getting it at the typesetting and all of that, right?
Yeah, that was the Douglas Shahan, the guy I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Great friend. I would have, and I said this in the copy I signed for him, and I sent him one of the. There's only two of the draft copies or whatever. When you
Mm.
first publish, they'll send you a draft copy. Send one to me and send one to him, because he helped me with that. I told him so many times I would have probably quit. But there's programs out there, so I don't want to, scare people off. There are programs out there that you literally just throw your Word documents in and it'll help you typeset and all this. But
Okay.
his ability to like go through it and format and help with all that stuff was
Yeah.
was tremendously helpful, because
Yeah.
I do not enjoy those type of things.
I mean, I think the other thing too, the takeaway too, is that it is a team effort. I mean, you do have to have other folks involved, and it's not just you know, I mean, the words just don't come out and magically land on the page in the perfect way. You need to have, and
Yeah.
those are completely different, not completely, but they are very different skill sets. I mean, for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And some people are passionate about it, right? Some people love doing that stuff. That wasn't not me.
yeah. And so then did you kind of have like a book launch, or did you just kind of publish and that was it and you just went?
Yeah, so much like a lot of things that I've done in my life, like, I was very underprepared for this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I didn't think I was going to write a book. So I literally just looked up and said, all right, how do I publish on Amazon? Worked with my buddy, he helped me with the typesetting, and I got it on there. It finally said there's no errors, which I'm telling you, that's a pretty exciting moment when it says there's no errors. And I literally just clicked publish, which,
Wow.
by the way, you want to talk about gut check moments as an author. I'm going to prepare everybody for this, because you're not going to be prepared for this unless I tell you. When I hit publish, I had a moment of complete panic, because I was like, you're out there. If everybody hates this thing,
There's no
it
going
you,
back,
you
man.
can't change it now. And then I had to go back to what I said before. Like, if I only reach the people I wanted to, then whatever. You know what I mean? I'm happy with that. So, but just be ready when you hit publish. It's a moment of like relief and panic. So just be prepared for that. But I didn't have a marketing strategy. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have answers to the questions of what's next. I had, you know, I mean, I didn't, I posted on Facebook to some people. And of course, because I hadn't shared it with anybody, you know, everybody's like, what do you mean you wrote a book?
Wow.
For my sons, I literally, they found out as they received a copy. My dad, my mom, I handed them a copy of the book. They had no idea. And
What was it like? What was it like getting your hands on that physical copy for the first time?
pure pure insanity. Like I looked at it so many times, you know what I mean, that I was just like, there's no way this is real, because the times that I fell asleep on my keyboard, or deleted weeks worth of work, and it had the self-doubt. It was almost calming, but like just surreal, I guess.
Oh, man.
It's pretty awesome, and I think that everybody deserves an opportunity like that. Everybody, if you've got some, and we all have things to share with the world, whether you think so or not.
Hmm.
You know,
Couldn't agree more. So what is next for you?
so that's I've been struggling with that, to be honest. I have a full time job, full time parent. Like I said, I mean,
Hmm.
that life is very busy. Um, so the book is out there now, and I'm left going, well, what do I want to do? And I think it just goes back to my whole purpose of
Hmm.
writing the book was, I truly believe, mainly because other people have told me, I think there's a lot of things in the book that can help people, that don't feel like they're prepared, that don't feel like they're good enough, that
Hmm.
don't feel like that are thrust into leadership positions, that they wake up and go, I'm not good enough for this. You know what I mean? I wasn't prepared for this. Or the parent or the teacher or the coach or whatever that's saying, what, how do I reach these folks? They don't seem like they're connecting with, what I'm trying to tell them.
Mm.
uh, I think there's enough stories and vulnerability in this book that will tell people that you don't have to have all the answers. If
Mm.
you literally give a shit, like I said, to go back to, people feel it to their core, whether it's your kids or the kids you're coaching on the team, or, my wife's a school teacher. She's an elementary school teacher. And you want to talk about somebody that hits the gas, like her teachers, or I mean, her kids that are now, from some of the first classes that are graduating high school, they still reach out to her. Kids from
Wow.
previous years come up and run and give her a hug. That doesn't come from surface level connection, right? Like
Mm.
if you are not reaching people at that personal level. So now I'm like, what's next is, how do I share it with people?
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for this launch. I didn't do it correctly, but now how do I show people, or have my message reach people? Because now I truly, because I struggle with, like, self doubt or whatever, I'm finally starting to say, you know what? I think you've helped a lot of people. And that's hard for me. That's
Yeah.
really, really hard for me. And now I'm like, can I help a lot of people? You know what I mean? And I don't know what that looks like. So I'm
Mm.
figuring it out, and that's okay. And I have to be okay with that as well. Just
Yep.
like when you sit down to start on your book, you know what I mean, or whatever, you have to be okay with that. You don't know what's going to come out on the paper at first. You don't know what the book's going to look like at the end. And for me, I don't know how I'm going to reach more people, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And like, you offering this up is an opportunity as well. And
Yeah.
I can't be more thankful for that. If there's one person that buys the book, or says, man, this really helped me get through a really tough time, then it's all worth it.
I know, man. I can't imagine. So, one thing, and that was so beautiful, man. Listen, you are a stellar human being. I can't thank you enough for being on this podcast in the early stages like this, for bearing it all, for writing the book, for connecting with me on LinkedIn, and just, the authenticity. You could just see, like, you could just tell, man, you're good people, and I wish you nothing but success. I hope to get an opportunity to work with you, yeah, on what is next. And because now you've built a platform for yourself, and now you've got a framework that you can hopefully help share this with more people. Um, but yeah, I really, like I said, I can't thank you enough for hopping on here. And let me think, is there anything else? Is there anything else that I think we've covered a lot, man?
Yeah, we
We've
have, and
covered a lot.
the thank you goes both ways. Like I said, this is humbling. I can't explain how cool it is. First of all, I told my kids, hey, I got invited to be on a podcast. Never in a million years did I think I'd be on a podcast. And they
Yeah.
thought it was, especially my 11-year-old, my older boys are like, ah, whatever, dad. But my 11-year-old hypes me. He's my hype man. You know what I mean? He's
No, I
always
love
like,
that.
cool. And it's truly humbling. And if I could just share anything with people, I would say the moment you realize it's not as complicated as we make it out to be, right? Like
Hmm.
that was the hardest part for me is when I came up with the gas philosophy is literally going, I'm it's nothing crazy, right? Like if you want to be successful in anything in life, if you want to be a successful parent or a coach or a principal at a school, you know what I mean, or leader coming into a position or anything,
Mm.
if at your core you give a shit about what you're doing,
Hmm.
what more can people ask from you?
Yeah.
And that's really
Yeah.
the concept behind the whole movement.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Thank you for being on here. Thank you for your service, most importantly. I love you, man. I don't know
Hey,
how else to say it. I love you. I really feel it.
right back to
Um,
you, man. I
yeah.
This has been
Thank
everything
you.
happens for a reason. We met for a reason, and I hope to keep up this
Yeah.
relationship and have more conversations about anything.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Dan, thanks again, buddy.
Thank you.